Let's start with the premise that any form of communication is difficult. Like anytime you have to explain your value proposition or your product to somebody, it's not an easy undertaking. When you're dealing with technology platforms, that becomes a lot more difficult to do.
Today's episode is a little different. We're not diving into ransomware, nation state actors, or the latest 0-day. Instead, we're talking about something arguably maybe even scarier and more dangerous, and that is bad storytelling. Because here's the truth. You can build the most elegant cybersecurity solution on the planet, but if you can't explain it in a way that makes someone care, it doesn't matter. Dharma Pachner, founder and chief creative officer of Contrast & Co., joins me to talk about how we take the abstract, the technical, the wildly complex, and make it comprehensible. Not watered down, not buzzword heavy, actually understandable. We get into foundational brand ideas, why metaphors work, how visuals do half the storytelling before you say a word, and how these simple, same principles apply whether you are rebranding a tech company or just trying to get your budget approved. And yes, we talk about why every cybersecurity website seems legally required to feature the same blue binary code and a glowing lock. So if you've ever had to pitch, persuade, propose, or present, this episode's for you. Let's get started. All right, so today we're going to do something a little bit different. Dharma is going to share his screen throughout this episode. So this one's especially visual. So if you're listening to us right now, great. And you might want to pop over to the YouTube channel so you can follow along and see everything that we're talking about in real time. So Dharma, what are the biggest challenges in communicating the value proposition of technology platforms and tools to a non-technical audience?
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's a tremendous honor to be here today, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity and conversation with you. So to answer your question, what are the biggest challenges in communicating the value proposition of technology platforms? Let's start with the premise that any form of communication is difficult. Like anytime you have to explain your value proposition or your product to somebody, it's not an easy undertaking. And you have brands like Nike and Gatorade that are fairly sort of self-explanatory in nature. But when you're dealing with technology platforms, that becomes a lot more difficult to do, making things more complicated. A lot of times you're speaking directly to a B2B audience, but even that B2B audience has varying degrees of technical fluency and proficiency. So you have a wide range of audiences, you have a complex value proposition, and if that's not challenging enough, in most contexts, you only have a few seconds to capture somebody's interest and tell your story in a way that's intuitive, that's clear, that's memorable, and motivating. So all of these challenges, I think, make branding in this space is especially difficult. And I find that of all the industries we work in, and we work in quite a few, technology and cyber remains the most difficult to brand. But I also think that creates a lot of opportunities because it is so difficult to differentiate or to capture your story and differentiate yourself in this space. The organizations that can do that effectively have a really powerful opportunity to stand out in a crowded category and truly become memorable.
I love what you said at the very beginning. Communication is hard. Words are hard, honestly. There's maybe on a daily basis, I think if I could just do a Vulcan mind meld to like help you understand what I'm trying to say, technology aside, anytime you're trying to communicate what's in your head and what you're feeling to somebody else, it's hard. And then you go to this incredibly complex landscape of cybersecurity that is not one thing, right? So there's not one technology that is a cybersecurity technology. There are thousands, and there are thousands of different angles and attack vectors. And so cybersecurity is just such a huge ocean. So I love that. So how do you go about simplifying the abstract concepts like cybersecurity for broader understanding?
Sure. Well, I think cybersecurity is its own special case just because, I mean, anything technology, I think, is inherently difficult to capture. I think cybersecurity is uniquely difficult to capture because it's just hard. It's like, what is like if you had to capture ransomware in an image, like what is that image supposed to be? Or phishing or application security development? Like, how do you capture that idea in a way that's interesting, but how do you also capture that in a way that adds clarity and that helps break down the complexity of an idea so people understand it? And I think one of the key things to remember with that is you don't have to be literal. You don't have to show a photo of actual ransomware. You don't have to show a photo of hackers or binary code to get the point across of what you're trying to communicate. And the goal when you're telling these types of stories, when you're capturing these narratives, is not to be as literal as possible. It's to try to distill down the story in a way that people can understand and remember. So I'll show you an example of that. So this is a law firm that has since been acquired, but they were building their own technology platform, an e-discovery platform that was designed to automate, use AI to automate and create efficiencies in the e-discovery process. And as we were trying to learn what e-discovery was, we just wanted to get a sense of what does it look like if you search for it. And this is what you see. You see these like Photoshoppy compositions of iconography and magnifying glasses and vectors and all of these attempts to sort of try and capture this idea of being of e-discovery. And this is where you see binary code everywhere. You see these.
Well, and also these images that you're showing get used for other ideas too, right? Like they're not unique to this e-platform.
They're not unique to the Z platform, so they make you look, so you fall into the sea of similarity, but you're not adding any clarity to the conversation. You're attempting to try to capture these ideas that resist sort of traditional expressions of how they can be communicated. So one of the things we try to think about is like, what's a different way to approach it? So for this particular challenge, we started with a quote they said, but they were talking about the e-discovery process. And it's like you have all of this information, all these documents across devices and touch points and platforms and mediums. And they describe it as it's this puzzle. You just have these pieces that come together. And so we took that idea of a puzzle, and if you think about a puzzle, like when it's holistic and whole, it's this complete thing. But underneath that, it's made up of all of these bits of information and data and knowledge. And we thought if we took that idea, could we break that idea apart and use it as a way to tell the story of the platform? So they talk about the e-discovery process as just being this highly convoluted process, very similar to like a hurricane. So we can use this construct to not only tell the story, speak to the story of the challenge, but we can also then reconfigure that shape and element to talk specifically about the need and the reason that they created the platform in the first place. From a design perspective, taking this less literal approach to it lets us communicate things. Like if we want to communicate the fragmented nature of e-discovery and documents and bits of information everywhere, if we want to communicate and reinforce ideas that their platform can create a smaller funnel for attorneys to review, or their platform can be scalable to different size matters. So we've got these building blocks that we can use in different ways because we haven't leaned on trying to come up with literal photography to tell their story. So it can scale out in any number of ways. By using this approach to it, we can talk specifically about abstract concepts like cloud. We've got this design element that can just be peppered in a small cosmetic way in brand communications. It can start to translate into an overall cohesive look and feel for the brand. It can translate into more technical components and process architectures. But what it does is it just gives us building blocks. It gives us different types of building blocks to tell the story. And it gives us a different way to approach the narrative that makes the concept a bit more understandable and relatable. So that's the opportunity in thinking about how you can explore things from a visual perspective in a different way.
Well, and I love a good metaphor or an analogy. And here, where they've used the puzzle, this is something that everyone knows what a puzzle is. So you've immediately got this this grounding um, of something that we all this shared common knowledge, right? And so we have an idea of, okay, so if it's like a puzzle and they're bringing all the pieces together, you're already communicating this really complex idea um, through an analogy that we're all familiar with.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the metaphors, and we'll cover that a little bit later in this presentation as well. But metaphors are, to your point, incredibly effective ways at laddering your idea to a concept that people already understand. So they can be very powerful tools to help reinforce a value proposition.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's talk about foundational brand ideas. So, what is a foundational brand idea, and why is it critical, especially in tech?
For sure. So great question. And it's critical in any industry, but I think technology specifically, just given the challenges we talked about. But the reality is, like, before any conversation around logos and color palettes or even messaging, I think every great brand has to be built or predicated on a powerful idea. So think like Nike, just do it, like an idea that
Right.
that transcends the way people think about the value proposition. It's not about sneakers anymore. It's about being a winner, and the sneakers are the vehicle to get you there. But I think it's an example of like a way to elevate the narrative. It helps people change how they think about the value proposition. But I think just as importantly, like a really powerful brand idea gives an organization a foundation to communicate. And especially in technology, where we see a lot of times brands rely on talking about their features or this functionality versus the outcomes and objectives that their platform or their technology creates. And orienting a brand around a foundational idea helps keep the narrative more oriented around business objectives, but it can also serve as a tool to help align internal teams, external messaging, and it can help ultimately it can help an organization stand out in their categories.
A lot of our listeners are practitioners. They're civil servants. Everybody has to communicate their ideas at some point, even if it's at home or, to your boss. When you talk about a foundational brand idea, I'm listening to you talk, and I think about like these big brands like Nike. Um, but it seems like it's something that you can apply if you get a foundational brand idea, if you have a proposal, like if you can get a foundational brand idea for that proposal, it will help communicate even down more at the micro level. Would you recommend that, or am I getting too low level?
No, absolutely not. No, I think in a perfect world, a foundational brand idea sets a vision, sets a trajectory, but it needs to be tactical and in the weeds as well. And I think if a foundational brand idea can be expressed in not just high-level brand communications, but down to the nuts and bolts of how an organization is communicating on a daily basis with their clients and prospects, it can be a very effective tool for just orienting messaging and consistently positioning the brand in a way that's effective for an organization.
Right. And for your personal proposal, for your personal, here's what I want my team to do this quarter. So right down even to that level. Can you share an example of a brand that successfully communicates its foundation?
So when I talk about a brand idea, let's say, in different organizations think about these and communicate them in different ways. But let's say this is your brand, this is your technology company. Like at the apex of it, at the peak of it, has to be a framing idea. And then that idea gets embodied in the name of your organization, your brand positioning, your messaging, your look and feel, your visual direction. And then ultimately it cascades down to everything from your website to training, marketing, BD materials. But The idea of starting a brand or building a brand around a core idea is not like a small obligatory step in the process. For us, it's the foundation of how how an organization can stand out. And we're asked all the time, like, what does an idea look like? Like, how do you give an idea shape and structure? And a lot of times, the people show the light bulb, but this hasn't been a new idea for a long time. I remember the first brand idea I ever saw, and it was this. I remember exactly where I was standing. It was in a CompuSearch store. And the reason it was so powerful was because when I was growing up, personal computers had just exploded on the scene. I was very much into them. And every single personal computer ad looked like this. It was like, look how much knowledge and wisdom and intellect you can jam into this cardboard box.
So what we're looking at is like a really old computer, personal computer with stacks and stacks of books, kind of the idea that it's all coming into this computer. Was that the last one that you showed? Was that Picasso?
It was. It was from the Apple original Think Different
campaign.
It's
just a picture of Picasso in black and white. That's what we're seeing. And this is one of the Apple. I don't remember this. But
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I talk about it.
So this was the original Think Different campaign, and it was a series of people. But what you realize in this is they were able to elevate the narrative, right? It wasn't about the machine anymore, but it was about what the machine allowed you to achieve. And then Think Different became this idea that wasn't just sort of this convenient tagline. Think Different became embodied in the hardware this organization was producing. Think Different became embodied in the software and the experience of it, the various products that they brought to market, the various platforms that they brought to market, even Think Different in how they operate a retail store. So Think Different is an idea of is an example of a brand idea that transcends the value proposition of the actual offer and positions the organization ahead. And it's not just limited to technology. I've got up on my screen this 50-year-old ad concept for Michelin tires with a tire and the baby sitting next to it, Michelin, because so much is riding on your tires. But what you're able to see,
we get that emotional tie, man. There's a baby next to a tire, and now all of a sudden I want those tires because they're going to keep my baby safe.
Yeah, and they're not talking about their rubber. They're not talking about steel-belted radials. It's a subtle shift in messaging, but it's profound at the same time. It's not about your tires, but it's about what rides on top of them. So that's what I mean by being able to take an idea and sort of elevate it beyond the value proposition. Mm-hmm. So in cybersecurity, how that could potentially translate, this is the before. This is a cybersecurity brand we worked with years ago that does enterprise attack surface management. This was their previous experience, and that's what they led with: external attack surface management redefined. And so as we went through the process, we're trying to think about a couple things. We're trying to think, how do we distill that down to an idea, and also how do we better capture the story they're trying to tell. And what they want to communicate is they have this ability to not just understand and see the gaps in the security surface, but bring that knowledge together to help advance an organization. So with that in mind, we were just trying to picture, like, what does a surface look like? And then as I'm just walking through visual examples, but a surface is this solid area. And what they talked about is these gaps, these little holes. These organizations have massive vulnerabilities across number of different types of touch points. So they have these gaps in their security experience. And as a platform, what this organization does is identifies and fills those gaps. So from a brand perspective, we have the start of a visual vocabulary for how we can communicate the narrative. But more importantly, we can now elevate it up to this broader idea of ruling your risk. It's not about being able to just have enterprise attack surface management. It's about being able to take your risk and use it in proactive ways to drive your organization forward. So this is how we think about taking a narrative, and then that can come together. Then both the visual language and the vocabulary of the brand can be oriented around that idea. So what does it mean defining what does it mean to rule your risk? Taking a thought leadership position on how do we bridge risk across departments? How do we prioritize the blind spots in an organization? How do we use our platform to prioritize our resource allocation? How do we use our platform to better hire and maintain security teams? How do we use our platform to generate assets that we can use to report to the board? So taking the idea of risk and taking the idea of ruling your risk and then turning that not just into a visual construct, but into a framework for how you communicate moving forward. What does your sales communications look like? Like, how do you talk about taking an offensive, proactive approach to security management? And then this is subtle and in the weeds, and if you're watching visually, but because we've established this vocabulary around the gaps, we can use that vocabulary to build out a brand experience that just ties it together. So this is early examples of like how that brand can come together and how the visuals can be oriented around a brand experience. Another quick example of one, and I'll show you before and after. This is a technology company that does a lot of integrations, does a ton of like ServiceNow integrations with big government organizations. This was their previous experience. And one of the things we were, again, Windward was the name of the company, and what they wanted to do is communicate that by use of their platform, their people, their processes, organizations can move faster and more efficiently than ever before. So taking that into account, we built a brand idea around this idea of being able to find flow, like flow being a specific state that organizations can operate in, and then that gets translated into the various parts of the experience. How do they find flow? How did they help Bank of America find flow? Like, how does find flow become an actual construct that can be used for marketing, case studies, and other types of communications? So I'm moving through the visual examples if you're able to follow, but from a visual standpoint, the opportunity is to always tie the visuals in to the narrative that you're trying to reinforce as well.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm looking at, a lot of these visuals, I mean, they're subtle, like the flow is just kind of this wavy line that then you've applied maybe up in the corner of a piece. And so it ties you back to that anchor of the flow, which again, let's talk about the metaphor, finding your flow. That's kind of been a buzzword for a while. So distilling the technology down to a metaphor, how do you go about finding the right metaphor to tell the story, to communicate this complex idea?
It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of trial and error. And there's an exercise that we'll introduce at the end of this podcast that gives you a sense of how to start with it. But it's usually trying to continuing to elevate the narrative. So if their product and their platform creates these benefits, what's the value of that? And then what's the value of that? And then what's the value of that? But we ultimately just try to keep finding ways, how do we ladder up from the specific technical value proposition to what the ultimate outcome is? And for this one, we had inherited this name Windward, and one of the things we realized by taking the mark and using the mark in this way, we could have a visual language that spoke to the nature of the flow that they created in their technical processes, but we had a language that could support and augment that idea.
Right. Yeah, and the visual, again, ties you back to the flow, and the shape that you've chosen is a W. It's subtle, but that's what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm assuming that was intentional, Dharma.
100% for sure. And I think monograms for logo marks usually give you a lot of flexible ways that you can use it to reinforce key concepts.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, even as you're working through a proposal that you've got to convince your boss to approve, I like how you've talked about with the brand, you're finding, is it the benefit? Is it the emotional tie? What is it? Help me distill it down to what that one thing that you're trying to get to that's going to hook them.
Well, I think the first thing is you have to spark an emotional connection. I think regardless of whether you're B2B, technology, cybersecurity, whatever, the first opportunity is, how do you strike an emotional chord? Like, how do you make somebody feel something? And then the second is, how do you make them understand that as intuitively as possible? And that's why I'm sort of leading back to the title of this podcast is like, how do you make the complex comprehensible? Like for this organization, Windward, if they're talking specifically about their technical breakdowns in their processes, they're going to lose people right away. They have to start with, what's the value we're creating? And then as the messaging unfolds in the brand, then they can start to balance their messaging with whatever substance, depth, and detail they need as conversations get more substantive.
That's right. I don't need to know how you make the sausage. What I need to know is that the sausage is delicious and it's good for me, and it will, make my babies grow healthy and strong. So there's that emotional tie.
Agreed, and all the more reason where you can get people to feel something. And they've done studies on on brands. People will form an impression of an organization in milliseconds before they've even realized that they're making judgments. They've already come to some conclusions. And so, from a brand opportunity, or from a brand perspective, the opportunity is, how do you make sure that that first experience instantly captures the right narrative and instantly strikes an emotional chord and captures the key ideas to help people move further along through the narrative.
Yeah, that's right. All right, we're going to take a quick pause here to thank our sponsor, Owl Cyber Defense, for making these conversations possible. And we are back. All right. Anything more to say about the metaphors?
Well, I've got a couple more examples in here. One of the things we talk about is, as you're trying to stand out visually, and this is where metaphors come in, like in the spaces that we're in, like you're in cybersecurity technology, is what you see is this like sea of similarity where organizations are using the same convention, sometimes the exact same images and photos to tell their story. So how do you stand out? Like, how do you create an experience that feels unique? So a couple examples of those metaphors. So this is a cybersecurity brand. This was the before ID Agent. They make credentials monitoring software. Basically, looks to see if people's information is in the dark web. And this was how they were telling the story of the brand. And there's nothing wrong with this, right? It's sort of at a high level. It sort of hits what the platform's able to create and key benefits for their partner channel partners. Sheet. It's a data sheet. But as we were going through the process, again, thinking about metaphors, like, what does cybersecurity look like? Like, if you actually Google it, like this, again, this is what you see. You see a lot of these constructs.
Ones and zeros and thumbprints. And yeah, we've all seen, we know we can conjure these images without even going to the YouTube channel right now, because we've seen these same images for 20 years.
Which I think just reinforces the struggle of trying to capture it, right? It's an idea that still needs to be expressed, but traditional approaches to imagery don't tell the story. So that's very liberating, because then you can think very differently about how you want to capture the idea. If you're not looking to capture it literally, it opens up all sorts of doors. For them specifically, as we were going through and like learning about the dark web and this object that had no form and no structure, no integrity, nobody knew, you reach out to try to get a hold of it and you can't grab it. It's not there. So we came up with this metaphor, this black smoke, as a way to speak to this idea of this dark web, this nebulous thing that nobody truly had a handle on. We had inherited this hexagon as part of their logo mark, and we realized we could sort of integrate those two elements together and then superimpose the messaging. So we go into the dark web to keep you out of it. So we've got this construct, we've got this visual metaphor that we can use in any number of ways. We can use it sort of high-level marketing. We can use it as we get into sales sheets and product sheets and overviews that give an overview of the platform. But now, because we're not trying to take a literal approach to it, we can figure out other ways to tell the story. So what you're seeing here is we were going through the process and learning just how porous the password system is as a way to protect organizations. So we've got this visual vocabulary we can start to scale out in different ways. We can capture these ideas. We can talk to the value proposition of the software using different types of metaphors to speak to its speed, to speak to its ability to recognize threats. But we've got this brand vocabulary that we can use that's not a literal representation of credentials monitoring, but it gives us a lot of opportunities to tell the story. And the reality is, and I'll just show one more in the space, it's not just about looking different. The opportunity is like, how do you use visuals to better describe what it is you do? So what you're seeing here is on the screen here is this is Audacious Inquiry, a company that's since been acquired. But what they do is care coordination. So anytime if you fall and break your leg skiing, how is that information then captured to your general practitioner, to your pharmacy, to your orthopedic surgeon? How does care get coordinated as people move throughout the system? And so they had this platform that was all about care coordination, and we were trying to think, how do we capture that idea? And when you think about care coordination, at any moment, any one of your providers has a very limited perspective into you and your health. Another provider has a different perspective. And
yeah, so I'm going to pause you here. What I'm seeing on the screen is you're bringing in sections of what looks like is going to become a holistic picture, but you're showing me, yeah, so you're showing me pieces of this woman representing this care provider's got this view, over here we've got this view with Instacare or whatever, and then you bring them all together.
And then you can superimpose your message on top of it. So what if healthcare providers could see a fuller picture of their patients? So from a design perspective, this is now we're using visuals to actually reinforce the narrative. What if healthcare aligned more holistically? Again, one single image broke up into 5 disparate strips, but they're aligned in a way that it's cohesive.
Well, so and it's a brilliant way to represent this, because we all feel this in the healthcare industry. Well, with my own personal healthcare, right? I've got multiple different doctors for multiple different things. You go to them, and none of them seem to be able to access the same record. It's exactly what this picture is. They've all got tiny little pieces, and you just think, for the love of Pete, why can't you guys, why am I writing down my medications for the 53rd time? Why isn't this in the system?
1,000%. And I think this is like, but this is an example. When we started this conversation, you talked about like the challenge in like words, right? The challenge in using words to describe what you do. But this is where like visuals help do the part of the story. Like even if somebody doesn't stop and read the body copy, even if somebody doesn't get into the weeds, at a high level, visuals are starting to reinforce the key concepts. And then those visuals can translate. So what you're seeing here on the screen is just representative banner ads, but you've got this scalable construct now that can just be applied across all different types of communications, from digitals to trade shows to down the road campaigns. So this is, again, we're thinking about both the visuals from a metaphorical standpoint, but also the visuals from a storytelling standpoint, how they can be used to capture and reinforce key ideas.
Right. Let's talk about ownable identity. What does it mean, especially in the tech space, and why does it matter?
So I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think ultimately when we use the term ownable, what we want to do, what we're talking about specifically is, how do we have a consistent, unique, recognizable look and feel that across all touch points that helps set us apart from competitors? And an ownable brand experience gets very much in the weeds, but it's a consistent set of signals that you use, from the color you choose to the typography you choose to the design shapes and elements that you use. But ideally, the opportunity is to bring all of those signals together. And when you bring those signals together over and over again, it becomes a lot easier to recognize and communicate as an organization. And it adds an incredible amount of operational efficiencies to the creation of the marketing, well, to the marketing and creative processes in general.
Right.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to move us to the next topic. So anything more to say here?
Yeah, so I was going to show you.
Okay.
So when I talk about these signals I talk about, so when you're building a brand, like you have a lot of signals. You have the
Hmm.
colors you choose, you have the shapes you choose, the various textures and the typography and the imagery, the composition, like how all those pieces come together. But when those signals come together consistently, the results are very powerful, right? Like you're looking at here on screen, all you're seeing is three signals, yellow type, an orange background, and one object. But if you're seeing my screen, this is clearly Reese's. There are thousands of companies out there that make peanut butter cups and candies. Reese's has done such a masterfully consistent job of these brand signals. Same thing here. If you're looking at my screen, all you're seeing is two colors and some typography, but you instantly know this is Dunkin' Donuts. Same thing here. You're
Yep,
seeing a red background and three French fries. You instantly know it's McDonald's
that's right.
because every one of these brands, there's not a single logo on this page, but every one of these brands is recognizable. So that's what I mean by ownable. It's a consistent application of these signals. And as you go through this process, like as you go through and determine like what are the right signals for my organization, my platform, these signals have meanings, right? Like you colors, take for example,
Hmm.
this guy or this woman, you're looking at a woman yellow smiley face, you realize like she has to be yellow. It's optimistic, it's positive, it's whimsical. And what we see a lot of times with technology brands is they say one thing and their visual signals say something completely different. And it's not hard to mess up a brand. Like what you're seeing on screen is the Whole Foods brand, Whole Foods logo, one of my favorite logos of all time. So many cool things happening in this logo. All you have to do is change a couple signals, change a couple color backgrounds, and all of a
Oh,
sudden you start to
yeah.
create
You went from
dissonance.
that healthy, luscious garden green on a white background to a black background with hot pink. Not the same message.
Not the same, and just enough to cause dissonance, right? Just enough to
Yeah.
cause confusion. And every one of these signals, like they make stop signs red for a reason because it's an arresting color and it gets people's attention. And you
Hmm.
start to mix up
You make a
signals.
green stop sign, that's confusing.
It's confusing.
You're going to
And the
cross
reality,
people's wires in their brains.
it not only that too, and it's not just colors, right? It's typography. There's all of these subtle details. And
Hmm.
the reality is your audiences and your technical buyers do not care. But that doesn't, they don't care that you use this font or this color for your brand, but that doesn't mean that they didn't respond to the experience that you created. So the opportunity is like, how do you uniquely combine those signals in a way that tells your story? So an ownable identity is recognizable. Like you look at our cyber defense and like starting from the beginning, starting from the photography selection, how do we feel different in the space? Like what are the signals we're using, our colors, our shapes, our patterns, and then how are we using them to sort of tell the story? An ownable brand identity is deliberate. And what I mean by deliberate is as you start to think about your signals and shapes, like where do they come from? And I'm looking at an owl cover of a couple reports, but you can take your logo mark by slicing it up in different ways and applying it in different ways. You can create masks and other types of elements that are subtle and tactical in the weeds tools, but they help you ensure brand consistency. And it can be the subtlest of details, even things like the shape of your photography can be inspired by the negative space in
Right.
your logo mark.
Well, and just looking at these colors and shapes, they're very strong, powerful colors and shapes. And you could send a very different message just by adapting the shapes a little bit, by, I guess, for lack of a better term, applying a little Gaudi, one of my favorite architects, applying Gaudi with the colors and the shapes, all of a sudden it becomes whimsical. It's no longer powerful, ironclad cybersecurity. Now it's Alice in Wonderland, just by changing a few subtle things. So you say the audience doesn't care, but because we have these signals from forever, the typography, the colors, we've associated them with certain emotions, certain meanings long before Owl Cyber Defense, right? Like the red, white, and blue, those are power colors. And so by associating those colors with the brand or your proposal, you're immediately communicating the message you're trying to communicate begins before you even speak a word.
Agreed. And to reinforce, color is an incredibly powerful signal. Color is and color has associations. Colors mean things. And I think like thinking about the goal is always think about what's our unique value proposition and what are the signals that best capture and reflect those ideas. So again, and if you're seeing my screen, you're seeing examples of this, but it gets like in the weeds. Like the goal is like if you're an ownable brand identity, like you're consistent, whether you have different types of communications or when you have different types of communications, what's the underlying like visual language of the brand and how does it translate? And I'm just moving through representative examples of digital ads with different types of content, different types of sizes, but we've got this visual language that we can play around with and use in a number of different ways. So it can be scalable from sort of high level ideas down to things like technical product sheets. And this is where things really do get in the weeds. Like it's great to have a big broad brand idea. It's great to have a set of visuals, but it's just as importantly to make sure as messages get more nuanced, more technical, more specific, more detailed, that the brand can continue to support, or the brand has enough range and flexibility to continue to support that. And then lastly, I think an ownable brand just continues to evolve and adapt. Like a brand is not a static entity. It's this living, breathing organism that can continue to, using the building blocks that it has, using the key ideas that it has, it can continue to scale out and frame in any number of different ways.
Right. So you've shown several different, I appreciate the plug here for Owl Cyber Defense. And obviously, full disclosure, the reason I'm connected to you is because you are our brand agency, you are our creative agency, and you moved through several different assets, Owl Cyber Defense assets. Some of them didn't even have the logo on them, but they were immediately recognizable as Owl Cyber Defense because of the color treatment, the shape treatment, just the imagery that's been established for a while now.
Yeah, well, thank you for pointing that out. And I think it's really important for organizations to look at their brand as like, they are these elements, right? You have logos and you have type, but it's your brand as a system. And when it's applied well, that system is recognizable regardless of which signals are applied. There's a lot of underlying, like, and we didn't cover this in this presentation, there's a lot of technical things you have to solve to get that system in place. But once it's solved, I think the value is exponential because you can continue, you have that instant recognition, you have consistency, and it makes it easier to continue to produce communications and marketing efficiently over time.
I like that. I like that systems idea. In fact, it's kind of it's a cybersecurity idea that you think about systems rather than individual components. You need to think about it system-wide. So, I mean, obviously, this is what Contrast & Co. does. You brand companies. I want to dive us down into the weeds a little bit and talk about, we've mentioned before that these principles anybody can apply them to a proposal they're trying to convince their boss to approve, to, any kind of initiative they're trying to roll out in the company, or if you're just trying to convince your partner to go to a dinner party that they don't want to go to. So let's talk about how anybody can apply these principles, and that this isn't just for creative designers, but it's for anybody. So yeah, go ahead.
Sure. The dinner party challenge is a little tougher. I'm not sure that one, but I'll show you a couple exercises. Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of times people see these brands and think you have to have designers and agencies and all of that. But a lot of these things, before you get to that point, a lot of these things are first just exercises in thinking and problem solving. So I'll share just, if you're looking at my screen, there's a couple exercises that I find super beneficial. This one on screen is called the 30 circle exercise. exercise. You're actually seeing 32 of them. And we have the PDF available, or we have a PDF of all of this available to
Yep,
download.
I'll put it in the show notes so you guys can do these exercises on your own. If it's an important proposal, this would be I think a good exercise to start the proposal with.
Well, this one too, I find is just to get this one is also good at just sort of illustrating both the challenges and the ways to sort of approach thinking uniquely about your brand. But what
Okay.
but if you haven't seen this exercise before, basically what you have is usually between 3 and 5 minutes. And the goal is to continue to try to fill out each of the circles, and each of the circles with an object that feels like a circle could, I feel like an object where a circle sort of logically makes sense in there. And the reality is, and you'll find is, this is very easy to do. The first row, you'll probably bang out in no time, maybe the second row. As you get further and further in the process, it gets more and more difficult to do. But these last few circles, that's usually where the magic happens. So as you start to, and I'll show you a couple other exercises or questions, but as you go through this process, you keep this in mind. It's like the immediate things that come to mind are most likely the immediate things that came to mind for other people. So the deeper you go in this exercise, the more it gets you thinking beyond the conventional thinking and predictable solutions. Beyond that, 2 specific questions that we use to kick off any sort of branding exercise is, what do you want to be known for? And what makes you different? And I think as you're thinking about your brand, your technology, your product, your value proposition, starting with these 2 questions, if you fast forward to a hypothetical future and your product, your platform has achieved what you wanted to in the market, what is that? If you can capture and articulate that, and then capture what is it specifically that you're bringing to the table that makes you different. And what we find is, if you have those 2 foundational questions, you can start the creative process. For us, the creative process, everything you saw earlier was digital. Every single thing you saw started with this. And we're very specific about the pens we use and why we use them, but we're really clear, like, these are not drawing tools. These are specifically like tools for thinking. And I always think, like, the back of the napkin sketch, if you've ever seen Southwest Airlines napkins, Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, back of the napkin sketch of what the initial brand concept was. This is a great exercise. It's a great litmus test as you're thinking about your product. Can you distill down your value proposition to something that people can just wrap their heads around instantly? So
and
as
you're suggesting you do this by hand, not on your computer. You're writing by hand.
By hand to start. At some point you want to digitize and bring things in, but the problem is, when you digitize right away, you're immediately thinking templates and AI solutions. When you're exploring pen and paper, there's no limit except your imagination. So you can take ideas out of the hypothetical, you can get a quick sense of, like, how things could start to function. This process is an extraordinarily quick and cost-effective way to start any sort of creative explorations. And as you do it, and if you're seeing my screen, there's rules to it. Like, a big squiggly line typically represents a headline, smaller lines represent body copy. But what we often start with is just a blank sheet of paper. And let's assume this is your website homepage hero, your logo's in the top left corner, you've got some sort of navigation. If you can take those ideas of what makes you, how you want to be known in this world and what makes you different, and this is where we usually start to explore, like, how does that idea translate into a headline? What sort of visuals could we use to tell that story? What sort of metaphors would best capture that idea? But these types of exercises, every brand you saw earlier was started with pen and paper. And regardless of your drawing abilities, your creative abilities, everybody can think with pen and paper, and this is an incredibly effective way to approach it. And the last thing I'll just say on that is, as you think about your brand and what it is and what it represents, and you'll have to be able to see my slides to understand this, but if you've never seen this photo before, I've got a photo up on my screen of a man working at his computer set back in.
That's a sad office. I've never seen this photo. It makes me so sad, Dharma.
Well, it's a very sad photo until you pull back a little bit and you realize this was Jeff Bezos in the original operating office of Amazon, with a spray painted Amazon.com banner behind his head. And whenever I see that, every time I see this photo, it just reminds me, like, anything is possible. Like, and when you're thinking about your brand, always thinking about, some targets are only meant to be aimed at. I think this photo is just a really effective reminder that always think a little bit bigger. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, this is going to bring us to our tech talk question part of the show. So this is just rapid fire questions at you, gut responses. This is just for fun. So my first question, if cybersecurity were a movie genre, what would it be and why?
If it were a movie genre, I think it would be a little bit of everything, right? It's a war movie, right?
Okay.
It's there. But it's got drama, it's got superheroes, it's got villains. Sometimes there's horror. It's got a little bit of everything. I imagine if
I
you
like the
dig deep
horror.
enough.
I think
Well,
for sure horror.
for sure, horror. There's probably some romance and comedy embedded in there somewhere. I think it's a multi genre
Oh my
genre
gosh.
category.
Okay. So, I mean, me being a sci-fi nerd, I would have just gone straight to, well, it's sci-fi, of course, but I love that you're going to have them all, and the horror's my favorite.
Well, the horror is real. Like when you read about like
It is
ransomware and those
real.
things like that, it's horrible.
No, I think you're right. I think horror might be the lead genre there. All right. If you had to explain Brad's brand strategy using a kitchen metaphor, what would it be?
If I had to use a kitchen metaphor,
Hmm.
I don't think it's an appliance because I think it's too big for an appliance. I think it's too big for an utensil. If I had to think of a kitchen metaphor, I would think it's the cookbook, right? It's
Ah,
the thing that sets the vision, it shows you what's possible. It's the thing like that gets people excited, and it's the thing that helps people understand and use the tools effectively.
I love that. I don't know if I would have come up with a cookbook. So I love that. All right. AI generated branding. Is it a creative partner or creative chaos?
It's both. Right, it's both. I think, and probably a whole nother conversation. I think for us as an agency, it's a reality, right? It's here to
Right.
stay, and there's no point in resisting it. I think from some perspective, we embrace it, I think, and it allows us to do things that were never before possible. Like we recently did
Hmm.
a sales kickoff with your team that I don't
We
think we
did.
would have been able to pull off with the technologies just didn't exist. So there's certain doors it unlocks that I think are wonderful. The challenge I think is it's going to sort of flatten out the medium, right? I think it's going to
Hmm.
lead to more creative consistency and more things looking and sounding the same. And as designers, I think the opportunity is like, I don't ever want to start I don't want to be a prompt engineer. I don't want to start a creative challenge with a prompt. So I think the way we're looking at it is like, how do we make sure we're starting with our own ideas, human
Yeah,
thoughts, and then we're using AI to add efficiencies wherever that makes sense. So I think it's both creative partner and chaos, but I think we're trying to continue to remember all it is a tool, a very powerful one, but the better we can understand that tool and the better we can use that tool, the more effective we can be as practitioners.
that's right. I mean, what you guys have done for us, because you embrace AI, is just it brings a lot of fun and levity to things that we're trying to do. Um, but I agree. Even when I ask you guys for something, I start often with pen and paper of why am I doing this? Like, what is my objective? What is the message that I'm trying to get across? And then I iterate on that. And then sometimes I'll go to AI and ask AI, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Help me organize my thoughts. Help me so I can communicate to you guys. This is what I'm looking for. And it really helps me that way. And then, like I said, because you guys are willing, and I've worked with agencies recently, as a matter of fact, that really resist AI. And it's very frustrating to me because um, the fact that you guys embrace it the way you do, I think it's exactly what you just said. You're able to do things faster and things that you wouldn't have been able to do even a few months ago because you're willing to embrace AI. There's no way AI can replace you guys, not for me. I mean, but using it has been a game changer, I think.
Yeah, well, there's that quote. I want to attribute it to Bill Gates. I don't know if it's him, but it's when it comes to technology, you're either the steamroller or the road. And
Oh,
it's one of those things like AI doesn't care if I like it or hate it, right? It's
that's
like
right.
it's going to
It's
continue to
here.
move on. And so, yeah, you have to be, it's almost, if we don't embrace it as an agency, we're going to be left behind. But I think the opportunity, I think to your point, is how do you come up with an idea and then use AI to like add efficiencies through the process, but how do you come to it with a stronger base or a more foundationally strong idea? So it definitely is going to continue to play a role. I think for us, it we don't know what the future brings, and I think it's like for many industries, there's a host of uncertainties with it. But I think in the interim, what we want to try to do is like, how do we use it in ways to advance our clients that we've never been able to do before?
Yeah. And man, you've done it for us. I love that it's a tool. It's a really powerful tool, and thank you for embracing it. So, all right. Well, Dharma, thank you so much for joining Tech Transforms today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thank you so much
Yeah.
for having me.
All
I
right.
loved it.
Well, last question. Where can our listeners connect with you to learn more about your work?
Oh, good question. So you can find us. Our website is Contrast and Co. contrastandco.com, and then you can find me on LinkedIn with my last name D Pachner, Pachner.
All right. And we'll put all of that in the show notes as well. So, listeners, thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, please share it, smash that like button, and leave us a review. That helps us reach more people who could benefit from these conversations. Tech Transforms is produced by Show and Tell and sponsored by Owl Cyber Defense. Until next time, stay curious and keep imagining the future. Thanks for joining us on Tech Transforms. If you enjoyed this episode, please smash that like button and talk about it with a friend. I'm Carolyn Ford, and this is Tech Transforms.